a lot of people think that say banking is very centralized, but in many cases, the regulators make banks divide certain activities between different parts of the bank and between different entities, even outside of the bank. So, for example, if you were invested in a mutual fund, if you had like a Fidelity mutual fund, Fidelity in that case is only the manager. The money that Fidelity manages is actually held by a third-party custodian. And then the shares, the money that you send in and you get back, those are all managed by another third party called the transfer agent. So these separation of duties, the separation of responsibilities, and kind of everybody needs to be doing their own narrow thing to get the product to work. That's the way we're trying to build Mehen, through having as decentralized and kind of multi check and balance type of an operation. It's crazy to me how centralized like USDC and USDT can be.
The Cardano ecosystem lacks a stablecoin, a fiat-backed stablecoin. We have synthetics like IUSD and collateralized ones such as JED, but we don't have that fiat-backed one that users can rely on. And we almost had USDA, but Emergo have put that one, postponed it at least for now because of regulation concerns. But there is a glimmer of hope, and that is Mehen Finance, and they're doing their fiat-backed stablecoin. And in this interview, I have Matt Plomin and Matt Tristan joining me to talk about their platform, how they're approaching the stablecoin space on the Cardano ecosystem, and some engineering things that they have solved to actually make this all possible. So let's get into it.
Yeah, gotta do it like that. You've been listening to the Learn Cardano podcast. Gotta get it hype. Crypto is what we like, but this is not investment or financial advice. Gotta do your research, cause it's risky. We know it is. This show is educational and it's informative. Crypto's the future, really, it ain't no debate.
I have the team from Mehen Finance joining me in this episode to talk about their fiat-backed stablecoin that they're building for the Cardano community. And this one's a little bit different, and the team here are here to talk all about it and to explain how it all works. I'm really interested in finding out a little bit more. So Matthew Plomin, welcome to the podcast, and Matthew Tristan, welcome to the podcast as well.
Thank you, Pete. It's good to be here.
So can I get a bit of an overview exactly of what Mehen Finance is and how it's different in the Cardano ecosystem?
Sure. So Mehen was originally devised as a fiat-backed stablecoin that was built in the model of USDC or USDT to be one-to-one backed with a bank account dollars or other kind of reserve dollars that are in a safe, secure, safe investment portfolio that would be either a AAA money market fund or some other kind of very short duration treasury or bank account, as we depending on what the mix of assets needs to be. After certain stablecoins get so big, they end up needing to go from a one bank to many banks to investment products like treasuries, and we want it to be in that same kind of a vein. So we decided to start this not quite a year ago, and we've been going through the process of getting licensing at the various states. We've been looking at offshore options in Europe, in the UK, and in the Caribbean, so either the Virgin Islands or it's going to be the British Virgin Islands that we end up like getting licensed in for a money transmitter, for a virtual asset service provider license in the BVI. So we wanted to build a stablecoin that was as good as you could be, one-to-one backed with dollars in a bank account, riding on kind of well-trodden regulatory pathways that have been demonstrated to be secure, demonstrated to be reliable in the fiat world. And then we ended up catching a little bit of an interesting snag with the on-chain part, because minting, controlling global state and making sure that there's enough reserves for the number of tokens that are out there is a kind of a tricky matter in Cardano or in any UTXO blockchain. So that's where Matt Tristan comes in with the smart contract designs and the ability to mint only up to the reported Oracle value.
All right, we'll get into the technical aspects in a moment as well, but let's dig back into the regulatory side of things. Out of all the projects that you could have come up with and built on Cardano, you had to choose one of the hardest ones. to try and build like all the regulatory processes to go through this is I can't imagine how hard it would be. But it sounds like you guys are making really good progress with all of this. How have you done this? It's like, do you know people or the right people to talk to progress this through to actually get it done?
Yeah, we do. I mean, for my career, I've been working in the regulated banking sector for 15 years now. And, when you live in it every day, sometimes you don't realize just how much you know and how much you experience that the average people don't. Just like for most professionals, what they do every day is, they make it look easy, that it looks hard to other people. So, for example, if I was doing YouTube interviews or podcasts every day, I'm sure that, I wouldn't be half as good as you are. You make it look very easy, but it's very hard if you've ever tried to record yourself saying something on video. So, kudos to you. And so it's not like we're trying to reinvent the wheel, though. That's the other thing is, I understand the landscape. I understand what needs to be done for a regulated money service business to operate within the boundaries of the law, and not only really the boundaries of the law, but the spirit of the law. And then also kind of how to institute some best practices that you don't often see in the crypto world. Coming from a fiat banking background, you kind of understand the difference between having everything centralized and the opportunities that having a decentralized system present. So a lot of people think that say banking is very centralized, but in many cases, the regulators make banks divide certain activities between different parts of the bank and between different entities, even outside of the bank. So, for example, if you were invested in a mutual fund, if you had say like a Fidelity mutual fund, Fidelity in that case is only the manager. The money that Fidelity manages is actually held by a third-party custodian, and then the shares, the money that you send in and you get back, those are all managed by another third party called the transfer agent. So these separation of duties, the separation of responsibilities, and kind of everybody needs to be doing their own narrow thing to get the product to work. That's the way we're trying to build Mehen, through having as decentralized and kind of multi check and balance type of an operation. It's crazy to me how centralized like USDC and USDT can be, where USDT, the USDT has the money, they invest the money, they hold the money, they have a custodial account at the bank, and it's really all in one. And that kind of a setup would never be acceptable in the traditional finance world, where a regulated asset manager would have to have a broker dealer, would have to have an independent custodian, would have to have an independent company valuing the assets on a daily basis. Those kinds of things are all standard practice. And it's funny, like knowing that that's standard practice and trying to get those standard practices implemented. Whenever we talk to a regulator about, we're trying to keep things, as much outside of our control as possible, and then giving the responsibility to vendors, giving the responsibility to third parties and independent parties to control the things that we do and make sure that we are acting exactly within the boundaries of what we set out to do. They really appreciate that, because we're trying to protect the consumer. And as much as people in the crypto world can be all conspiratorial about, well, the regulator really wants to just kill crypto, I think a lot of times the regulator wants to protect the people that are, everyday citizens. And if you're out there taking extra steps in that direction, you really get a warm reception. And it's a breath of fresh air for them, I think, too.
Wow. Okay. I had no idea about those finer details and the division of roles within the financial industry and how they all act. So it's really good to get up to speed and educated about those aspects. Now, why hasn't a stablecoin like this been created in the Cardano ecosystem yet? And why hasn't USDC or USDT entered the space? We've seen wrapped versions of it appear and go or whatnot, but we haven't seen one actually be native to the Cardano blockchain itself. And it seems to be like taking forever.
Well, I wish that they did. That the reason that we're doing this is because they haven't done it yet, and the ecosystem needs it. Through the development path, we kind of understand a couple of things that are different about Cardano. in Cardano, the tokens, are self-custody. They are actually in your wallet, whereas an ERC20 token is actually a list. And so your wallet is on a list. And then the ERC20 token manager kind of inputs your address and a certain number of tokens into that contract. And so that's how they can lock it. They can burn your tokens without your consent. They could do all kinds of things within the smart contract that governs the token. And I think that going from that operating model to one that is like on Cardano, where you have individual tokens that are freely floating throughout the ecosystem, and it's your responsibility to govern your own boundary. So the edge of the Mehen operating platform is when people come to mint and they send us dollars, we send them USDM. And when people come to burn and they send us USDM, and then we send them dollars back, those are the activities that we can control, and those are the activities that we are regulated within. So that's kind of one half of it. The other half is maybe Cardano isn't so big, and they didn't want to necessarily invest to get the second part of the problem, complicated problem fixed, and that is having global state control in a UTXO environment. So, normally on Cardano, I'm sure that your listeners are well aware of this, but sometimes token issuers, they will issue the full volume immediately. And if it needs to be controlled somehow, they'll lock them all in a smart contract. And then the smart contract will emit them either based on some kind of a vesting schedule, or if it's like a JED part, as a part A and part B in that ratio, then they're released in that certain ratio based on how much ADA comes in. So in that case, there's a trillion JED. So that's fine. As long as it's in the smart contract, it's not a problem. But what we're talking about is we can't have a trillion USDM on chain and have people understand that it's all backed one-to-one. They could say, well, what's not in the smart contract is backed one-to-one. And then that's a little extra extrapolation you have to get through to have people understand that, we're actually not just pushing tokens out into the ecosystem without any backing. We're making sure that every token we mint is actually backed. And so we came up with a design. We worked, Matt, a couple of folks on the development team, put together a nice schematic where we have a system that takes in the Oracle, mints two tokens. It mints a counter token, and it mints the token that goes into your wallet. And so this counter system is what governs the total outstanding. And the issuance of the two tokens, the counter token and the actual USDM token, the counter token goes into a central wallet so we can measure exactly how much is in the ecosystem. And then the second token that goes is the USDM token that's freely flowing. And then as we come back, whenever they're burned, the counter tokens are burned as well. And that kind of paired system is one that is unique to Cardano. And it's also unique to our project within Cardano. But also is what it does is it gives us a good chance of looking at one specific point and understanding exactly how many are minted and burned, or minted and totally floating in the ecosystem without having to do a snapshot of the blockchain. And you can actually, if that number is coded in, you can interact with it using an Oracle. So we can go to third party and have an independent check on the reserves. So we can be more than just transparently reporting the reserves. We can also have those reserves cap the total tokens that are available to be issued. And I think that challenge and that ability to control and limit the total number that are outstanding within the UTXO environment is the challenge that USDC and USDT didn't want to invest the money in to solve because Cardano is not so big. And I think that sort of is this whole chicken and egg problem between whether newcomers come to the ecosystem or things get homegrown. And so I think that's why you see a lot of things getting homegrown in Cardano. And who's to say that may not bring more newcomers, but that'd be fine, I think. You'd be very welcome.
Yeah, it's a really interesting mechanism to put into play. And Matthew Tristan, you're the one that came up with this or coded it at least. You got any comments about this?
Well, there's a few people, that also, I would say it was a group contribution. We got Christian, the guy who made Helios, did some of the initial design, and then I modified some of it to basically, interact with the Oracle, in a way that makes more sense for the contract. So it was kind of a group effort. But as far as implementation goes, yeah, I implemented it using Icon and Lucid. And then more specifically, the counter, it doesn't go into a wallet, rather it goes into a smart contract. And so it's kind of an interaction between like the minting validator and the Oracle and the smart contract that really makes things tightly coupled and secure, so that you have that behavior that Matt was describing, or Plomin was describing, where at no point in time can the total amount of USDM on the Cardano ledger exceed what's in the actual reserve. And that can be cross-referenced because, the Oracle, it's on-chain, that on-chain data is public. So anybody could view what's on the Oracle, anybody could view, how much USDM is out there. That people are pretty familiar with how to use tools like Cardano DB Sync in order to do that. So in that way, you have a very transparently operating basic stablecoin protocol, essentially.
Now, just for the listeners out there that don't understand global state, now a global state is easily possible in the EVM space, but on Cardano and UTXO blockchains, it's really hard to get the global state. Can you explain to us what global state is and what that specific challenge is on Cardano?
Yeah, sure. So I think when people think of global state, they think, how do I refer to data, right? Because like in Ethereum, if you're trying to refer to, or at least to my understanding on Ethereum, if you're trying to refer to some set of data, like everything is viewable by everything. Whereas in Cardano, contract interactions are only viewable by what you're including in the contract. So your interactions are, the data that you have access to interactions is limited to what UTXOs you can grab. And that can also be limited by the transaction size as well. So the idea there is basically, how do we have this information of how much USDM is out there, be able to match not how much USDM is out there, how much USDM is in the reserve, be able to match at all times what's going on in Cardano. And basically the whole idea is the way the stablecoin protocol works, it acts as an instance that manages all of that and then allows the minting and burning. But once the token is minted or burned, you can kind of forget you can kind of forget about that. You don't need to manage that anymore. Once the token is minted, then you can, distribute that token to who it's supposed to go to. And it's a Cardano native token. Once it's in the wallet of users, the only person who can control that token is that individual. But at the end of the day, it's about making sure that whatever happens, the amount of token minted doesn't exceed what's in the reserve. So it's kind of a managed state instance, a set of contracts that achieves that.
If you think about how people in a current environment would control the state, they would control it by either looking to the total number so they'll look to, say, a DB Sync instance. So there was a situation a while back where one of the biggest, actually probably the biggest NFT project on Cardano, accidentally double minted an NFT, because every time somebody came to mint a new one, they checked their instance of DB Sync to make sure that it was not yet minted, and then they went and then minted it. So they actually looked at what was an outdated view of the blockchain, and it could just be a couple of blocks outdated. But because it was a couple of blocks outdated, they missed the fact that somebody had already minted one of those. So they actually had a double mint because they were using an off-chain system to control the on-chain system. And similarly, because we're talking about fiat money, what could potentially be large volumes of fiat money, and we don't want off-chain systems that could be subject to bad actors, could be subject to errors like that one, could be subject to timing mismatches or other kinds of exploits. We want everything to be controlled within the Cardano ecosystem with on-chain, visible, public, and secure, just like the rest of the network.
And I think this brings onto the next topic in regards to the testnet integration of Charlie 3 Oracle and testing against the actual reserves in your bank account. And I thought this was a tremendous milestone for the project to be able to actually verify how much data, how much money is in the bank account, and then mint accordingly if it was possible. Can you talk a little bit about this particular milestone and how you guys actually achieved it?
Yeah, we've been looking for that kind of an integration for a while. One of the things that we're kind of looking at as far as a roadmap is initially we'll have a bank account, one bank, one account. When the total outstanding gets bigger, we have second bank and a third bank lined up to take additional deposits. Once the second bank, third bank are over, they all have API access. They would be able to feed Charlie 3 the value of the account. There's no timing mismatches there. It would be sort of after close in the business day, the money's then the API feed is then hit to Charlie 3. So we've been looking to do this for a while. We were talking to Charlie 3 since the Las Vegas conference, CNFTCon. There was one Web3 Expo between CNFTCon and Rare Bloom last year that I was able to talk with the guys at Charlie 3 and understand their use case, and they kind of understood our need a little bit. They took them a second to figure out exactly how to ingest those feeds and put them into an Oracle print on chain, but their system was very well built and very comprehensive. So we were happy to go with them. They're working now with Indigo, and now they're working with us, and hopefully that can bring them a few more interactions with Cardano projects. And it's nice to have the bank talks to the Oracle prints it on chain. We don't interfere on any of that. And they have access to more than just the current balance. They have access to all of the transactions. And so what we would like to do as we go forward is have those as well interact with the smart contract. So we could have, we will know if a certain amount hits the bank account with a certain transaction ID. Those types of things can come then and counteract, correspond with the user account side. And really be a kind of a hands-off approach that we're taking to the minting and the burning of the USDM, and let the Oracle, let the bank, let the actual fiat transactions govern what happens on chain. And that's our kind of ultimate goal. Once we get bigger, we'll need to change the feed that goes into the Oracle. If we have a money market fund and a treasury portfolio and a bank account and a second bank account, like those things all need to be aggregated. And so that's where Charlie 3 is going to be very good with us, is they'll be able to take those multiple feeds, put them together into a single value that can then work on chain.
Okay, and it's a good separation of those roles again. So it's letting Charlie 3 handle all those aspects, helps decentralize those certain aspects. I'm always, I'm sure the API side of the banks don't fall over. They must have a lot of security and redundancies, but I'm always worried about certain fallover points and an API from the bank, not responding and not giving you guys the correct data. Is that a possibility, or is the banking system well secured and bulletproof enough to always provide you guys with the right data?
I think that operationally we're going to end up needing to have extra USDM that's in between stuff, just to make sure that things flow correctly. So if we have X number that's out there that individuals use in the ecosystem, I think we should have kind of a swing flex kind of account in the middle where it's Mehen owned, minted, our own tokens that we have to facilitate intraday transactions that could happen throughout the chain. So we'd like to help with that and kind of build our own internal liquidity so that it's not such a clunky, like somebody minted today, the bank is taking a while to update. A lot of bank processes, as much as we'd like to believe that they're automatic and reliable, a lot of them are still manual. So that needs to be considered, that those things could fail. Like there's an engineering principle that you want to design for failure. So we're going to design for failure such that if if your car wheel falls off, there's actually extra pieces in there so that if certain parts fail, the wheel won't just fall off. It'll fall out. It'll fail in a manner that the wheel doesn't fall off and the car doesn't get wrecked because something within the wheel is broken. So that this is an engineering design concept that we're integrating in. So if the Charlie 3 Oracle should not update, or if the bank should not update, then we're not able to mint. But that's actually a good thing to control, to make sure that the reserve is there. We will have an obligation. We'll have a legal obligation to provide the tokens to people who mint. So we'll definitely be able to do that once the system gets churning. But we wanted it to fail in that type of an error instead of the other type where, oh yeah, well, the Oracle's not updating, but we'll go ahead and mint anyway and send it to people. And then all of a sudden we find out that the failure was actually something else, and the money never came in, or the money actually got reversed back out because someone canceled their transfer. And then we have more USDM out in the ecosystem than we have reserves. And that's a situation we want to avoid.
Okay. And where is all this liquidity going to come from? Like, how are you going to get users to start minting USDM? Because we've seen the JED stablecoin launch, and there was a lot of fanfare. There was a lot of interest in it, but it's kind of waned off a little bit, and not as much has been minted since the launch date. How are you guys going to attract more liquidity to Mehen Finance for USDM? Can you get to institutional investors in or something? It's like, how is that like massive amount of liquidity that's required going to come into the ecosystem?
We've been talking to some larger players in the ecosystem about minting and helping with the liquidity. We've also, we're in conversations actually. After we're done here, I'll be talking with one of the DEX, one of the leading DEXs on Cardano, about enhanced yield farming, enhanced liquidity provision. So we'd like to work. They say go where the people are. So we're going to the DEXs. We're talking to them about helping us with increased rewards, not just from the trading fees, but also from a share of revenue that we can give to them to help them pay for additional yield farming. So we're kind of going through that process now about getting more on-chain demand from individuals. And we do have individuals who are ready to mint in large numbers. And we'll also reach out to new ones. We're going to talk to the general Cardano, big pieces about getting additional liquidity in with us. But for now, it's sort of we're talking on, kind of consider that the distribution channel is talking to the DEXs, getting the DEXs to work with us to incent demand on the individual DeFi users side. And then what we could do is we could supply some liquidity into the ecosystem. And then as demand needs, we'll certainly sell it into Cardano, and then sell it for ADA, cash out the ADA, and then kind of recycle that. But we could bootstrap liquidity that way. But then we're also talking about after launch an initial liquidity bootstrapping event that will help. We have additional incentives for minting USDM and additional rewards for folks who mint it, inject liquidity into LPs, or mint it and use it. As far as if God willing, we'll be able to be part of some of these CDP protocols that are doing stablecoins, just like USDC and USDT are part of DAI. We'd love to be in that conversation as well. So to the extent that we've had these kind of use cases and partners across the ecosystem, we'd love to be there as well. So we're trying to incent like demand side, rather than having like some big whale come and say, okay, here's $5 million, go mint some USDM and put it out there. like that's very limited liquidity. And that's the $5 million is a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, but that's not the kind of uses we want. We want people to come, individuals, lots of them, to come and mint and use it on chain, get it into LPs, make it kind of a primary payment system within Cardano, and one that is convertible for fiat, so they can get the money back and then use it, on chain, off chain, like however you want. So that's really where we expect things to shake out. I'm willing to listen to any other options, but that's, I think, the best way to go is to go to the community, work with the community to get them excited about building this thing up.
Yeah,
Matt's got a lot of strategies too.
Yeah, going for a very community focused approach, and I think there's a lot. I think it's very clear to see there's a lot of demand for stablecoin in the Cardano ecosystem. I know I'd be willing to directly put my money, into this protocol to mint a stablecoin, and I think why people would particularly be interested in doing this is because it's the most capital efficient way. It'll be the most capital efficient way in Cardano so far to bring a stablecoin into existence. As we all know, there's other stablecoin protocols on Cardano, but they're all some form of synthetic backed by ADA. And because of that, they have to be over collateralized. So you have to put up like more ADA than what you're getting back. And I think for a lot of use cases where people are trying to mint the dollar in order to yield farm in a DEX, or, maybe they just want to have the dollar. It's like, well, maybe I could just sell my ADA for the dollar and just have the dollar in my bank account or something. But in this case, they could bring their dollar on chain. It's a secure environment. It's Cardano native token. It stays theirs. No funny business can happen with it, really. And it's 1-to-1. A dollar is a dollar. USDM is equal to $1. So I think that capital efficiency is also really going to entice people as well for minting in the Cardano ecosystem.
Yeah, I totally agree with that capital efficiency. It's always hard to give up a large chunk of ADA for minting a stablecoin, because you end up with less. You really do end up with the less, just to protect your position. And then you have to watch it and make sure that there's still enough collateral in there, so you don't get liquidated or something like that. So it's a worrying game sometimes, like playing around with some of these platforms and DeFi plays. But so this is all well and good for attracting liquidity on the Cardano side, so within the community itself and players within the ecosystem. What about exchange listings and getting external players into the ecosystem that aren't within Cardano itself? Listing on exchanges is expensive, it's costly, and takes time to do as well. So have you guys gone down that path of reaching out to exchanges, looking at exchanges and seeing if USDM can be listed there to attract liquidity? And of course, users in the Cardano ecosystem would probably want to be able to exit as well to an exchange for fiat too. So that's another part of the ecosystem. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I agree. We've had some good conversations with Cardano Foundation, and that they are doing a very good job with connecting us with the centralized exchange community. A lot of some of the trouble is that we would have to mint a great deal of inventory and then list it on the DEX or centralized exchange. And frankly, we don't have millions of dollars to put in the bank account, mint inventory, send it to these centralized exchanges. So our banking partners are USDC member banks. So we expect that individuals will be able to send USDC into the bank account and then have that be converted straight to USDM. I think the conversion fee for the bank is $15 per transaction. So it could be, depending on your volume, a very low transaction fee, especially when you're used to dealing with the types of fees that they have on Ethereum. So that's one possibility, is to have folks coming into Cardano through that channel. There is a little bit of a limited number of exchanges that have Cardano native tokens offered as as possibilities. So there's work being done there. I'm not going to name any names or say that we've had any contracts signed, because we haven't, with the decentralized exchanges. So we're definitely not there yet, but we're working on that for sure. And Cardano Foundation has been very helpful with it.
Okay, awesome to hear. It's all positive overall. And probably the last thing I'd like to know is, like, how on earth are you guys funding all this, all the time, development, and everything around it? It's a lot of effort, and you've got to form a team and everything behind it. And it all seems like very community focused and community driven. Like, how are you guys funding yourselves to get to this point, and then get the liquidity that you need to inject into the ecosystem and everything else around that?
We've had a couple of investors, not very much money, frankly, has gone into the project. We have, bootstrapped a lot of the spend ourselves, and the folks who are on there building the technology and building so I can certainly craft legal documents and get policies and procedures in place without having to hire a lot of external counsel. I have, we're just basically like drawing on the network of friends and community members that we know. Matt Tristan's, fantastic dev that we ended up finding on the ecosystem. Cardano delivers every time. It's not been a very, to be frank with you, it's not been a very expensive endeavor. It's not millions of dollars to get this thing launched, but it has certainly been a lot of intelligent people dedicating their time and effort toward the parts of it that they can each do. And then we're kind of, Voltroning this together to make our own piece. Yeah. Pieces that are just kind of coming together.
Voltroning it together. I love that. I haven't heard Voltron in many, many years. All right. So for anyone that wants to learn a little bit more about what you guys are up to, follow your community, follow the journey as it is at the moment, and hopefully see the USDM stablecoin on Cardano very soon. Where should we go to find out a little bit more information and join your communities?
The website is mehen.io, mehen.io, and the socials, Mehen Official. I'm I think Matthew Plomin on Twitter. He's Plutus Plumbus, Matt Tristan.
Yeah, I'm Plutus Plumbus on Twitter.
Yeah.
All right, brilliant. I'll put all the links and references in the show notes, and everyone can jump aboard and follow your journey and see USDM on the Cardano blockchain. But gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast, and I look forward to chatting again soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
If you like what you hear, please join their communities, Discord and Telegram, and make sure you follow them on Twitter. They have a testnet coming up very soon as well, so make sure you check that one out. Matt is doing some really interesting things in the space, as well as reviving various projects as well. So he's doing a lot in the Cardano ecosystem. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving me a thumbs up, click subscribe, and click on that little notification bell. That ensures that you don't miss out on another Learn Cardano episode. As soon as it's uploaded, you get that email notification, and you can jump on and get the latest and up-to-date information around the Cardano ecosystem. But until then, I'll see you in the next video.
Yeah, gotta do it like that. You've been listening to the Learn Cardano podcast. Gotta get it hype. Crypto is what we like, but this is not investment or financial advice. Gotta do your research, cause it's risky. We know it is. This show is educational and it's informative. Crypto's the future, really, it ain't no debate.